No doubt, with all of the turmoil in the world, you have heard more talk about the person called the Antichrist. Who is he, and what will happen when he comes?
With all of the information flooding our inboxes, YouTube, social media, how are we to know what's true, what's sensationalized, and where do we go for the right answers?
And with all the world's events unfolding at the moment just now, how close are we to seeing the man of sin and the beginning of the tribulation time? Tune in today as we explore all of this and so much more. Join us as adventurers through God's Word, the Holy Lands, and beyond, exploring the fascinating and the weird, the difficult and the obscure. Come and see how the stories are woven together and how they still apply to our lives today.
We promise to bring you joy, hope, inspiration, and intriguing out-of-the-box thinking, and ultimately salvation through Jesus Christ.
We are so glad that you could tune in and be with us today. I am Pastor Penny Schulz.
And I am Kristen Scharrenberg. Welcome to
Live Life in the Spirit. For all of our amazing content, you can find us at our website at any time at livelifeinthespirit.com.
You can also find us. We have YouTube, Rumble. We are on multiple of the podcast feeds, so iHeartRadio, Spotify, iTunes Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music. That's right. So you can find us on all those places. We're at Live Life in the Spirit. On all of our sites, we are at Live Life in the Spirit. That's where you can search us up and find us. And all of our podcast episodes are on there.
And if you go to our website, you can even catch our blogs that we have up there for inspiration. And if you're looking for a t-shirt to share the gospel message, it's God Still Writing Your Story, Stop Stealing the Pen, with our QR code on the back.
That's right. And if you just need some more inspirational content, or if you have kids and you want to get them interested in the gospel, go to Penny's YouTube channel, just at Penny Schulz without the T. And she has all of her messages and then her magic to the Gospels.
Well, today we're going to jump right in. We're looking at Revelation 13, and right. This is a big one. This is all about the man of sin, the man of perdition. He has two different titles, but it's the same guy. He's called the beast. He's called the Antichrist. Of course, not in the book of Revelation.
No.
You're going to find that in
1st and 2nd John.
So today, let's just go ahead and dig in and start with the scripture, and let's just get a basis for where we're at. We looked at 12 last week. That was exciting with all of the things that are happening right now. If you have not watched that, I encourage you to go back, because we looked at the eclipse and CERN and NASA and how all that fits right in with chapter 12. So now today, we're going to be looking at a lot of stuff, how it fits right in with chapter 13.
The dragon stood on the shore of the sea, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea. It had 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 crowns on its horns, and on each head a blasphemous name. The beast I saw resembled a leopard, but had feet like those of a bear and a mouth like that of a lion. The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority.
One of the heads of the beast seemed to have had a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. The whole world was filled with wonder and followed the beast. People worshiped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast. And they also worshiped the beast and asked, who is like the beast? Who can wage war against it?
The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies, and to exercise its authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. It was given power to wage war against God's holy people and to conquer them. And it was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation.
All the inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, all whose names have not been written in the Lamb's book of life. The Lamb who was slain from the creation of the world. Whoever has ears, let him hear. If anyone is to go into captivity they will go. If anyone is to be killed with the sword they will be killed. This calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of God's people.
Then I saw a second beast coming out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon. It exercised all the authority of the first beast on its behalf, and made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed. And it performed great signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to the earth in full view of people.
Because of the signs it was given power to perform on behalf of the first beast, it deceived the inhabitants of the earth. It ordered them to set up an image in honor of the beast who was wounded by the sword and yet lived. The second beast was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that the image could speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed.
It also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. That number is 666.
All right, well, there is a lot there, and I can see why there is so much confusion, because people think that the beast is Satan, or they think, you're talking about beast here and a beast there, beast everywhere, and then you're talking about an image of a beast, but then you're talking about the dragon.
It's really hard. It took me reading through this and having lots of discussions and a lot of study time to get it all really set in my head, who all the players are.
So we know that throughout Scripture, again we said, in order to interpret this, it isn't so much imagery, the Bible interprets itself. And again, you have to go back to the Old Testament a lot of the times to figure out what that interpretation is. We see that the 7 heads are the 7 main nations we talked about, and who were they? Babylon, Egypt,
Persia,
Syria,
Greece,
Rome. And then the last one is going to be this globalist system, this
one world government kind of thing. Spoiler alert for a later show.
Yeah. But the other interesting thing is Satan has always had something with every nation. And what is that? It's a religion. It's a priesthood. It's never just been the global power.
There always has to be a religious element, because they want sacrifice. They want people worshiping. He wants people worshiping him.
And each nation that, as we went through that list, the next one took something from that first one on the religious side of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, aspects of that religion continued throughout, for sure.
Oh yeah, we've had these deities going throughout the whole thing. And, we said it started with Babylon. You have Nimrod, who said he was a god, and King Nebuchadnezzar thought he was a god almost. And from that, Egypt came next. And what did the Pharaoh say?
The Pharaoh said that when they became Pharaoh, they went in and they sort of took on the entity of whatever god they were worshiping, and they became part God.
They were God,
That's
yes.
Right.
Persia, kind of the same way. They took the stuff from Egypt, and then Assyrian. This is, I guess you get into Nineveh and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then Greece, now you're having all these entities of God, Zeus, and all them. Even Caesar. Mm-hmm. Caesar said, I am God. Mm-hmm. You just see that this has been
it's been a thing.
Now, what is it that the United Nations, though, this is the only time where we've willingly had an entity over the world that has representatives as a kind of a governing body. But that governing body wants to take over the sovereignties of the world. They've said so with their own agenda, with Agenda 2021 and Agenda 2030. They are out there for anybody to read or to see, if you're paying attention. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing. The statue of the United Nations that's literally in New York City, and this is what I'm going to put up, is the leopard, the bear, the wings... The lion claws, it is all of it, and it is literally right there.
Definitely some food for thought.
It's like, you can't make that up.
No, we can try all we want, but you can just go look.
Who decided to be the sculptor for that? Or who came up with the plans? Who came up? Was it? I don't think it was because they were reading Revelation 14 or 13 and said, oh, you know what? I think we should make this to look exactly like that.
let's make an image of the beast. That seems like a good idea. Probably not. But somebody, on some level, somewhere, knew.
So we see that when this Antichrist, he starts coming up, he's actually, like I said, he has power of some sort. He's in charge of some part.
Right. He's got earthly power and control.
And he's known for that first, as we get into the tribulation time, this is those last 7 years, the first half, the 3.5 years, he's known as the man of sin. Satan has not entered him yet. So we know that Satan has been able to wander around. And, you know, this gets to be really interesting when you look back at, as we've kind of talked about with Satan, his actual name is Hallel in Isaiah. But somehow we've interpreted Hallel as Lucifer.
I'm not sure how that happened or where that came from.
And that's the only one. And it's not Jesus who said it. It's not God who said it. So why do I bring this up? Because El goes all the way back to the very beginning, to the Canaanites, the very first. Enlil. El. That's who they worshipped. The Romans actually worshipped El. It was a conflict of Israel with Kronos, was the Greeks. It's Saturn of the Romans. It's the same entity, El, Asher, of the Assyrians, Enlil, which is Moloch for the Hebrews. It's all the same, which is, you know, these are the Titans. These are the sons of God. These are the ones that have been chained to Tartarus. So why do I bring this up? Because it is Satan who still roams on the earth. He is the prince of the air, which means he could still go back and forth. But these other entities, where are they at?
They are locked in Tartarus in chains.
So they are so bad, they're locked up. Now, I'm not making Satan sound like a good guy, but I'm just saying it is interesting
that they've allowed him to continue to wander in. That God allowed him to continue to wander in.
Okay,
have influence and power.
Yes, and why then do I bring all this up? Because it's Milcom that convinced Solomon to build the high place. Milcom is the name for Moloch. And where did he build this high place?
Well, the Mount of Olives is higher than the Temple Mount.
So when you're looking out those east gate, you are looking right at where that high place to Milcom would have been. And who is the entity Moloch? What is he known for?
Child sacrifice.
They have on so many graves of all of these children who were sacrificed to him. If, bringing this all back around to the last several weeks that we've been talking about, if Solomon, and we know he put this high place up there on the hill. Now, of course, down the way it was other kings who came in and tore them down, and others built them up and then tore them down. But where do we think Jesus was crucified?
On the Mount of Olives. At the top.
Probably at that spot. And when he comes back, where's he coming back to?
Right there in that same spot.
On that spot. We know that's why. He is showing that he has triumphed over
even that.
All of those deities. The most of the, I mean, if you think of the horrific sin of all the sacrifice that have taken place. So Jesus spent that last week of his time teaching between where?
Between the Temple Mount and the Mount of Olives.
So the Olivet Discourse is the longest passage in the gospel, and it was up there on the Mount of Olives, and Jesus was telling them what was to take place, what would take place. Was it for them? No, but they thought so. Here we are 2,000 years later, and it's still applying.
Right.
And it was at that spot. Oh, can you imagine what that had to have been like for him? Knowing at that very spot where he's talking about all this, he knew that that's where he was coming. I mean, he knew that that's where he'd be crucified, probably. He knew that's where he was coming back, for sure. That's where he ascended, was up on the Mount of Olives. Just...
You have to imagine the emotion that he would have felt Would have been pretty strong. And yet,
it's hard to believe that his human body could even handle that kind of emotion.
it really is.
So right here, what John is talking about, again, this is not in chronological order, but he's kind of showing, and we're going to get a little more into the Antichrist again in depth in 17. But what we're seeing in 13 here is he's showing this overall synopsis.
And he's kind of giving us a clue of who the 3/4 players are on the evil scene during the tribulation.
So we have the dragon, which is the red dragon, is always a representation of
Satan.
And then we have the beast.
Right. Or in this case,
out of
the sea, the first beast. And that is the Antichrist. But that's just not what he's referred to as in Revelation. He is called the beast.
And 28 times he's called the beast coming out of the sea. He's called the man of sin. He's called the man of perdition, the king who exalts himself in Daniel 11. Now, he's going to have authority for 42 months. That's the last bit. The first is the 3.5 years,
right.
the times, and half a time. So where is this guy going to come from?
Mm-hmm.
We know it talks about this other kind of a beast creature that has 7 heads, 10 horns, 10 crowns. And you're like, okay, what is that referring to? This is talking about what?
This is the Antichrist and his power and authority.
It's also talking about the rulers that had been,
Sure.
countries that have come up, the empires, I should say, and those who will be at the end.
Right. The 7 and the 10 refer to the 7 as the world dominating powers that had been up to that point in time, and that the Antichrist will be this spoiler alert, one world government leader kind of thing.
And he's actually going to be part of them in the beginning process. It isn't until the halfway through that all of a sudden he comes up to his
power.
full, where Satan actually gives him his power. Is it 1 John 2:18? This is the last hour is when the Antichrist is coming. So that's where we get the Antichrist. It's in 1 John and 2 John.
Sure.
That is mentioned several times.
So, and then the word Antichrist, there's this little a Antichrist, and then the big A Antichrist. So the big A Antichrist, that's the one that'll come to power at the end of times. The second half of the tribulation, Satan enters him like the big bad guy. But there's been a lot of people in history that have been little a Antichrist. Or some would even argue that maybe in each generation there's someone that could have become
Satan always has somebody prepared in every generation. But it goes back to the Roman Emperor Nero.
Oh.
He dipped Christians in tar and lit them on fire in his garden.
To have a little tiki torch.
Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin, they were the greatest mass murderers. 30 million of his own people.
That was Stalin.
And Stalin said he was the one who cast the ballots don't win the election, but the ones who count them do.
Yeah.
That was Stalin.
Yeah.
It's like kind of dealing with that kind of now, but it's not new information.
There is nothing new under the sun.
In Zechariah, it's where he talks about this foolish shepherd. Zechariah, that's what I said, in order to understand Revelation, you got to go back to the Old Testament. You got to look in Zechariah. You got to look in Daniel. You got to look in Isaiah. These different things who flesh out and give the whole story of these characters that we are looking at.
Sure.
So Zechariah actually talks about this man, this Antichrist. What's going to happen to him and how he's going to rule.
And then Daniel 36, he speaks blasphemies against the God of gods. He will end his power when Christ returns.
Don't you think that's interesting that he blasphemes against the God of gods? So even then, I mean, they still know that Yahweh
Is
Adonai is the supreme God.
Well, and that's an interesting, another interesting interpretation is that it says that he will have no regard for the God of his fathers. Now, some say that that means that they think that the Antichrist will be Jewish and that he will not honor the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob.
Well, and one could even argue fathers could maybe even be Arab, because Ishmael, father was Abraham.
True.
And he worshipped God, and I think Ishmael did too. I mean, it just divided. Well, why I want to go back to this, in order for this Antichrist to come, I mean, he is a man. He's called the man of sin at the beginning. But the biggest player that we have going is the red dragon. And the red dragon represents Satan. The red dragon has been around forever. The Antichrist will only show up here at the end. But here's just a little background. Because we have this player from the garden, the Nakash.
The serpent of old.
Yes. Now, the cherub or the seraphim, a lot of people think they really are about the same thing. The only difference is the two wings, as we have looked at. But they're the bronze shining one. He's known as the light bringer. He's known as the masquerader of light. Why do I bring this up? Because there's so many names throughout all of history for Satan. And this goes all the way back to the very, very first, the civilization, the Canaanites, Sumerian, that's way back before anybody else. And they worshipped Enki and Enlil. Well, those are actually the names of the same gods as you work them up, but he is the god of the prince of the air. The prince of the air. Now, why do I say this? Because in Isaiah talks about Satan. And he says, I saw you fall, Hallel. But what name do we give him?
Lucifer.
And yet, he's never called Lucifer anywhere else in the Bible. That's not even the
translation.
Yes, the translation for that. It's Hallel. Which, when you look at that, all these other names are El. It's Enlil. It's
yeah, there's El in so many of the different ones.
And then when you even look at the Carmel is the god of the vineyard, El of the vineyard. Bethel is El of the temple. It's god of the temple. Dagon was the chief god of the Philistines. The Philistines were who? Goliath. And then you bring that, guess what? He is the chief god of Gaza. Interesting.
Which is another, Marnos is another name for Dagon. El Molech.
So when you have this name for the Satan person, or this god, this entity going up, now you have Molech and Saturn, and a lot will argue that these are the 200 that are down in chains in Tartarus.
Right.
Well, now you have Satan. So it's like, now wait a minute. How can it be the same guy? Because you have Satan who is wandering.
And he has been given freedom to continue to kind of wreak havoc here on Earth.
Go back and forth. And he's called the Prince of the Air. But yet these other ones, so if you think about as bad as Satan is and everything that he's doing, these other ones, though, are chained down below in Tartarus. How bad do they have to be?
Must be pretty bad.
But we know what was Molech's big thing?
Child sacrifice.
And so we know that in his prison cell, he's still working with his minions to get this stuff up. So we have the red dragon then, who is, well, we talked about this in 9, about who is going to bring the keys down, because they had the keys. God had given man, Adam and Eve, the keys when they were in the garden. Satan took the keys away from man. Jesus dies on the cross, goes down to Tartarus, takes the keys back, and in the end, an angel falls from heaven with the keys to open up
the abyss,
the gates of hell. And then in the end, Jesus takes the keys back again. So
it's a lot of gatekeeping and key mastering.
Got any Ghostbuster fans out there?
That's right.
You know what we're talking about. So why do I bring all this up? Because this is the red dragon. This is the one who is behind the beast. But the beast is going to come alive. Is the Antichrist then going to be purely man right now, the son of sin?
Right. Probably, yes. Yeah, from the
beginning. Very much.
Yes.
So, but here's what happens at that pivotal 3.5 years. It says that he is wounded. He's not just wounded, but he is fatally wounded. And it tells us exactly how he's wounded. Does he get blown up with a grenade or shot with a machine gun?
Well, no, but they wouldn't have known what that was. But it says he's struck by a sword.
Yes.
And that his right eye is taken out. So it just kind of makes you wonder. And that he has an arm.
His right arm. So when you think about it, how would they have done that? Well, maybe if he was doing this and they caught his arm and caught his eye, I don't know. But
either way, something happens that affects the right eye and then an arm. Mm-hmm.
And Zechariah tells us this. You wouldn't know that unless you looked at the other part. Okay, so now we have the red dragon and we have the first beast, which is the Antichrist. He's been ruling for 3.5 years. Mm-hmm. And this is when the witnesses are in. Mm-hmm. Now, these 10 kingdoms, which we don't know who they're all going to be, the world's going to be divided up. I mean, we have the United Nations, and very well could be, he could be the 10th Secretary of State. We don't know. It could possibly be. But while he's doing this, God sends the 2 witnesses on the stage. And he is not happy.
No.
They can rain down fire from heaven and everybody hates them. Everybody hates everything about them. They kill them. And what happens?
3 days later, God reanimates their body and takes them back up.
Okay. So now we hit the halfway point. There's another beast that comes up out of the land. Which is land in Hebrew. And what is that beast? It says it's a lamb with horns. Have you ever seen a lamb with horns?
Is this a trick question?
They don't. You can have sheep.
Right.
You can have rams.
But not a lamb.
But not a lamb.
With horns.
Which means it's a wolf in sheep clothing. Mm-hmm. He's coming as a lie. He's pretending.
And he is the false prophet.
Bingo. So this is the religious. We said that Satan can't do the one without the other. He can't just be global domination. He can't just be controlling the world. There has to be a religion. There has to be
worship.
Worship behind that. And so here we have the Antichrist, the first beast, but now we've got the second beast coming up. That is the worship part.
Right.
That's going to get people to what?
Worship and follow the Antichrist and Satan.
But he comes, like I said,
like a wolf.
False.
Yeah, a wolf.
Everything about him is false. So, but this guy, when he comes doing wonders.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. He has some sort of power and authority to trick and to he deceives the nations into believing that really what they have to offer is what Jesus and God have already done.
So he can rain down fire from heaven. So he's imitating who?
Elijah.
Okay, but when the 2 witnesses rained down fire, everybody hated it. Now that this guy's raining down fire, what?
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. He can do miracles.
This is the coolest thing. Yes, he can do all these miracles. So when the Antichrist then has this mortal wound, what is the false prophet's real job in this whole thing?
To heal it.
But how does he just heal him? He
raises him up.
Yeah, he resurrects him. Right. So at that halfway mark, when the Antichrist is resurrected, it said it is at that point that Satan then enters him. Mm-hmm. So now he's no longer the man of sin. Now he becomes the man of perdition.
Right.
It's at that middle mark. So Satan is now entering. Did you know there's only one other person throughout all of the scriptures that Satan literally entered? And he's also called the son of perdition.
I did know that.
Who is that?
Judas.
Judas. You allowed it. But did you notice with Judas, Satan enters him
and then leaves.
Mm-hmm. He doesn't stay.
And
so the Antichrist has been dead for 3.5 days. Do you see the parallel? Everything Satan does is paralleling what Christ did.
Because they're going to take everything that God and Christ did and try to make it their own and make it evil.
So you look at his ministry was on the scene for 3.5 years. The Antichrist up to this point has been doing his work, his ministry for how long?
3.5 years.
Jesus then dies. The Antichrist
dies. Jesus resurrects.
After 3 days, and the Antichrist resurrects after 3.5 days. Jesus still bears the scars of the nail prints, and what does the Antichrist bear?
And it says that his arm is left lame or disfigured.
And his eye, he wears an eye patch.
Right. Which, you brought up an interesting point about that, the eye patch.
Uh-huh.
How many, if you just like stand back and take a quick thought of all of the evil villains you've seen.
Cartoons recently.
Yes. How many of them have an eye patch? A lot.
And it's the right eye. You know, we said all along that Hollywood prepares us for everything if we are paying attention to what's going on. I don't think it's just coincidence. Well, and okay, so here's what I wonder then. The false prophet resurrects the Antichrist, but does he really? Because who has been the only one who could ever resurrect somebody?
God.
Exactly.
You had me worried there. I was like, that's a trick question.
So, if God is the only one who has ever resurrected anyone, two things could happen. One, God could allow this man to be resurrected. Or, this is where we're getting into that clay and iron mixed, possibly. Could it be that in that 3.5 days that he is dead, that he has already been cloned? Could it be that the cloned version or the AI version or whatever would be what would resurrect? One could say, okay, so if he'd been miraculously brought back to life, if he was completely cloned, well, would he still have the bad eye and the arm? You'd think he'd be completely healed unless
they did that on purpose.
They wanted that for the effect.
Right.
So when we get into that last 42 months is when it is as if it wasn't bad enough. Right. It is literally hell on earth. And now this is the dispensation. What does that mean? Because people are like, what? You know, it talks about the saints. He will war with the saints. No, these are the people who are still here. This is why the rapture happens before the tribulation starts. Because afterwards, it's not going to be. Right now, you can, unfortunately, if you have accepted Christ as your Savior, we are so happy. But there has to be a change inside of you too. I mean, you know, you have to want to live for Christ. You have to, are we perfect? No. Are we still going to sin? Yes. But the desire to want to continue to keep sinning, Paul even says that. He says, just because of grace, does that mean that we can continue to sin? You know,
no, that's not how it works. We have to strive to do better.
However, there are going to be many, many well-meaningful Christians who have accepted Christ, who have not lived in accordance to God's laws or Christ's law, that are still going to get to go to heaven. But at this point, there's not going to be a choice. It's not going to be, oh, well, you know, I can worship the beast, or I can receive the mark, and I can still accept Jesus. That's not going to happen. And this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where everything comes to the line in the sand. Because in that last bit, it says that it will be the false prophet. Now we have this other thing that's going to happen. This image of the beast is going to come about. And why? Because it talks about the new, well, in a sense, temple. Because he is going to go in to the Holy of Holies. You can't go into the Holy of Holies unless there is a tabernacle or a temple.
Right. There will be something that, because he can't be called the abomination that causes
desolation.
Thank you. I will keep wanting it to be desecration.
Desecrating the temple.
Exactly. So that's why I struggle with the desolation part. But anyways, you can't have that if there's nothing to
go in and defile.
Defile, right.
And this time, unlike Antiochus Epiphanes, who resurrected a statue of Zeus, the Antichrist is literally going to go in at this point and say, I am God. So now going back, we've already mentioned that it's Satan that enters the Antichrist at that time when he resurrects. And we said, is he man? Is he half man, half machine? Is he cloned? We don't know. But that's when this image is erected. And this image, it could be a hologram, Or it could be, and I'm going to put a picture of this. Have you seen that statue? And it's called the Giant, and it's going around to different cities in America, and they can project different people's faces on it. This thing is huge, and it moves, and it.
With the technology we have today.
What is that a parallel of in the Old Testament? King Nebuchadnezzar erected what?
Statue of himself.
Yes, and what was the thing that they had to do?
They had to worship it.
They had to worship it. And when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, no, it ain't going to happen, what happened to them?
They got thrown in the fire.
Okay, so here we are. It's parallels. Old Testament, New Testament. This is not new. This time, it is going to be the false prophet that is going to get everybody on board to worship this image of the beast and to worship the beast.
And that's where we know that some form of temple or tabernacle has been rebuilt, because then that image of the beast goes in and becomes the abomination that causes desolation.
And Jesus refers to that, and he's not referring to what happened to the Maccabees. No. He's referring about the end times.
Because he walks in there and he declares, I am God.
Which then brings us to the false prophet is going to require every man, woman, free and slave. So there's going to be slavery again. To receive what?
The mark of the beast.
And the mark of the beast, it's the mark of man, which would
be 666.
So those who do not accept this mark, there's not going to be, let me think on it.
Right.
Let me take a rain check. I'm going to storm the castle. It's not going to happen.
No.
This is going to be a do or die, literally. So this is there is a different gospel message that's being preached during the tribulation than before. Before, like we said, you can be a Christian and you can accept Christ and you have free will that you can still choose to live outside of God's rules, laws. And if you have accepted him, it's not by works, it's by faith alone, in Christ alone, by grace alone, that you go to heaven.
Right.
But now, in the tribulation time,
the stakes are a lot higher.
You can't say, oh, I'm going to accept you, Jesus, but get the mark. Right. Now, I don't know, maybe if you get the mark, the Bible's pretty clear about what's going to happen if you take the mark. But I don't know if there's still a chance of redemption after that. We don't know.
Right.
But we know you can't say, I accept you, Jesus, and then, well, give me the mark too. Right. It doesn't work that way. Because what's going to happen to everybody who does not receive the mark?
They'll be killed. They'll be martyred.
So here you have Jesus died for all of us. But in the tribulation, you're going to have to die for Christ. But that's really not any different than throughout all of history and the Bible and the Christians and everything. Everyone who's ever been persecuted. If you say the name of Christ, if you take him, a lot of them are killed right there on the spot too.
Right.
It's still not going to be a whole lot different. But in chapter 4, when it talked about the souls under the altar that were crying out, how much longer? And they were given white robes and told to wait a little longer. What's it referring to?
Those are the people who were martyred during the tribulation.
It's talking about right now. So we kind of had that one episode that we did on the different books. And this right here is talking about the Lamb's book of life. Those whose names were not written in the Lamb's book. So we're going to see those who lead with the sword, who try to fight the Antichrist. It isn't going to happen.
Right.
They're going to die. So I know that this is the big thing. This is what everybody wants to know. What's the 666? Well, we know it's the number of man. And we know that throughout all of history and even now, there are so many things that reference 666.
It's true. And there's been lots of speculation throughout history, though, of different times when they thought, oh, this is the mark of the beast. This is what it's talking about. Oh, maybe not. This is the mark of the beast. This is what it's talking about.
I think they all are yes and no. They're all precursors to this. As we said, that there have been a lot of little antichrists, little a antichrists throughout all of history. I mean, you can go back with the Jews with Hitler. He made them have their arms
scanned,
tattooed. 6 million Jews. They thought that was the mark of the beast. I remember back when they came out with Social Security number. Everyone was, well, that's the mark of the beast. Well, it's the mark of man, but, you know. The RFID chip, it's the size of a grain of rice. You can implant it in your hand. But guess what? Everyone thought that was it. Now we got nanobots that are even smaller than that. You look at your UPC code with the 2 big lines and all the little ones, and the 2 big lines and little ones, and 2 big lines. They can be fat or thin, but those 2 big lines represent 6. Guess what? You got 6, 6, 6. The world system is everywhere.
Right.
They've now come up, and I'm going to put a picture up of this. It is the quantum digital tattoo. And it's this little square with these little, like, pokey things, and you put it on you do it yourself. So you put this on the right hand, and the ink actually comes from the firefly.
What?
Yeah, so it's like that neon.
So like it glows in the dark?
Yes. And Satan is what?
Lord of the Flies.
Oh, and they
lovely.
have inside called, this ink is called?
Luciferian ink.
Yes!
Can't make this
Luciferian.
up.
No! They sensitized it and called it luciferase.
That's just, wow.
And the patent on the cryptocurrency is
060606.
that you can't buy yourself. So that ink, you literally run it like under a black light.
That's just crazy.
And it is so minute, you can't even see it. So this Luciferian ink is so that, you've been to Walmart, I'm sure you've done self-checkout. I haven't been invited to the Christmas party yet either for employees, but you know, one of these times.
Or given Employee of the Month.
Yeah,
I want the parking space.
I want the discount.
That's right. That's right.
But you run your stuff over and it says scanner. Well, that's what this will do. It scans your hand. If you don't have that in this new society, in this new world, we'll get into this more in chapter 18 and stuff with the New World Order, but you're not going to be able to buy and sell. And so the point was just that cryptocurrency that everybody's talking about now, that's kind of the big thing. And we're seeing that the banks, again, we'll get into this later too, but we have, before it was 186 banks, now it's up to 220 banks that are failing. They're trying to squeeze it all into just a few.
Right.
And move everybody to this new digital currency. But that digital currency is a 666. And guess who's behind that?
Bill Gates.
He is the founder behind that whole thing. And I just heard another pastor say this, it was kind of funny. He says maybe that's what Jesus was referring to when he said even the gates of hell will not prevail.
Oh.
That was just funny. No.
Nothing personal.
Nothing personal.
But it is clever.
But this is the number of the beast, and there is a pattern, and that's my point. Am I saying that any one of these are it? No. I think it's going to be something even yet different, because we've even talked about, on my sermon I did, the God gene, going in with CRISPR technology and these nanotechnology and everything. They can go in and literally change your DNA, and I think that's really what's going to happen. So one could even then get into the whole question of who is going to be the beast. Who is coming up out of the second, I would say, when Satan enters this new resurrected beast, the Antichrist, who's that going to be? I've heard a lot of people speculate Nimrod, and they say, what? That doesn't make sense. Nimrod, most people don't even know who Nimrod is.
Right.
Who is Nimrod?
Well, Nimrod would be the creator behind the Tower of Babel and the force of it. He was in the lineage of Noah from Ham's line.
He was the son of Cush, who was cursed. And so we get into this is pre-Canaanite. This is old culture.
And Nimrod, they said, became, at the very least, more than human. He was
kind of like King Nebuchadnezzar. He changed. Something in him changed. He was no longer just man.
Human. Right.
And all the more reason why he would be the one to come back, that he is the one in the abyss. He was the one trying to open the portal in the first place to get back to God. This whole thing has been trying to get back to God. We're looking at this number of man. as I said, there's so many interesting things. You know, in 1 Thessalonians 5:23, Paul says that we're made up of what?
3 parts.
It's
The spirit, the soul, and the body.
Okay. The spirit is dead because of sin when we're born. We don't get that again until we're a new creation. So that means we're 2/3. And what is 2/3?
666.
That's
Interesting.
the number of man. It isn't until we die that we get our new body in Christ.
And we have our spiritual body and our spiritual beings. We're whole.
So why this kind of gets confusing for a lot of people is because it's like, now wait a minute, there's Satan. And then, but wait a minute, we have these other entities, but wait a minute, they're locked up and he's free to roam. But a lot of them are said they're all the same person. Are they really?
Right.
And that's where we kind of argue a little bit about this.
Amongst ourselves about
amongst us. You know, it's like
it doesn't matter.
in the grand scheme of things, no, it does not. All we know is that there is an entity, a Pollyanna. It gives us the names of the one who is going to be coming back, which, you know, we had that conjunction, that star, December 20th, 2020, if you remember. And people were hailing it as the Christmas star. Oh, this had to have been the conjunction that the wise men saw when Jesus was born. No, it is not. It was Jupiter and Saturn. It was the wrong time of year and everything. That was not the conjunction that they were even looking at.
Right.
They were looking at with the constellation of Leo and everything. But that particular conjunction actually ushered in the age of Aquarius. So for those of you who are older, if you remember in the 70s singing the age of Aquarius, we're just now finally ushered it in 2020.
That's right.
Which is kind of funny that they were singing about it 30 years before.
Prior to that. Makes you wonder.
It happened.
50.
Oh. I'm old.
Oh, the look on your face just then.
We're doing it.
Sorry.
So that would be a whole jubilee.
It would be. It
Think
would
about
be.
it.
Absolutely.
Interesting. It is interesting when they were thinking about it to when it came into place. Why do I bring all this up? It's just setting the stage. It's bringing all those pieces together. Are we there yet? No, but we're getting so close. Do we know what the mark of the beast is? No, but we have been groomed. We have been indoctrinated. We've been prepared. We've been desensitized to all these things. If you have to go to cryptocurrency, are you accepting the mark? No. There is going to be...
There will be something that you will know that this is the line in the sand. And if you choose this, and also keep in mind that hopefully you won't be here.
If you've accepted Christ, this isn't even going to be an issue.
Right.
But for those of you who might be watching this in the future, and you missed it the first time, we're giving you this so that way it makes sense. There's going to be that line in the sand. There's going to be the time when you're going to have to choose that in order to accept Christ means I'm going to lose my life, but he took his life for you.
Right.
That is the hope. That is what we live for. Because if you choose to take that mark, oh, you're going to spend eternity, but it's not going to be with Jesus. It's going to be an eternity in the lake of fire, and the scriptures tell us that.
Right. Not somewhere you would want your worst enemy to have to go.
The signs are all around us. Just like we said in the kids' cartoons, they're more and more, they're getting so brazen with everything, talking about the dark side and talking about what's coming. And as we said, the statues that have popped up all over that are just reminding us of this. You know, in Daniel 7, it talks about the lion that stands on his own 2 feet, and with Nimrod, the ancient world, Ninorta, the Azu bird, or Anzu bird, hybridized animal. It's
like a lion with eagle's wings.
And then it has feet, has the lion qualities, but it has more of like a centaur body, and then a lion's head.
And that scorpion's tail
Uh-huh.
That's important.
It is important.
The beasts that come out of the abyss have that scorpion's tail.
And they link this Ninorta to Enlil. So is Satan really trying to create an avatar? And that's the point then with this beast, with the Antichrist. When he enters into him, what is he entering into? Is he entering into an avatar? It's just like the movie. You know, when he in the movie Avatar, he transfers his essence into a new suit, and then bam, he's there.
Right.
Is that what's really going on? I don't know.
Yeah,
That's for speculation. But it's not so far-fetched. If we'd had this talk 30, 40 years ago, people would have looked at you like you had your foil hat on. And people might look at us now, but except we have the technology.
Oh, the technology
right now
is there. And people are already talking about it. They are moving us. We've talked in several of our episodes about the fact that we don't go from where we were 30 or 40 years ago to where we are today by a leap. We go because they move the line little tiny bits at a time, and they give you a minute to get comfortable with that, and then they move it again. And it's like if you put the frog in boiling water, it's different than if you let it simmer up.
The difference is right now, though, we are going by leaps and bounds because, and I think that's why they bombarded us with so much technology and things are moving so fast, because you can't keep up.
You really can't.
How can you react when things are going so fast? And that's the problem with even our laws and our legislature, even though they don't pass anything. But even if they were, there is no way they could keep up. Mm-hmm. Impossible. And that's the point. Bombard you with so much stuff so that before you know it, you went from here to here and you didn't say a word. Well, what was I going to say? Mm-hmm. There is an interesting thing here too. With bone marrow, we talked about the DNA, changing the DNA. Yeah, I have nothing, this is nothing against being a bone marrow transplant recipient or donor. This is not at all. But this is something fascinating that they have found out. There's a gentleman in England that they've really been studying, and he was a bone marrow transplant person. And they have been recipient, and they have been following him through this. And his DNA is literally starting to change into the DNA of his donor.
Which it makes sense because so much of our life is created through our bone marrow.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So if that's the case, it's not a far stretch of what they're doing.
No, it's not a far stretch to think that they could use that kind of information or technology that is meant for good and take it and use it in ways that is far from good.
So as we look at this whole system that's coming, we look at the Antichrist, we look at the false prophet, we look at the image of the beast, and we talk back to Nimrod. How does that all work? And Nimrod was Babylon and all that. It was the greatest kingdom. Babylon might have lost militarily, but what did it still win at?
Culturally.
In fact, all the way through, Rome is nothing but Babylon. And when it talks about the revived Roman Empire, it's really the revived, I've argued this.
The Babylonian Empire.
Mm-hmm. We've kind of popped back and forth back to Isaiah, but this is really where it is the red dragon. It is Satan who's behind all of this. Mm-hmm. He's behind the Antichrist. He's behind the false prophet. He's behind the image of the beast. It's all to do with worship. And it was literally Hillel that said, I will set my heart above. I will ascend to the heavens. I will raise my stars above God. I will make myself like the Most High. Which was the royal dignity, that power, the dominion of this present age. An empire of darkness. So Satan is literally playing for keeps. We had a lot of people say, and I've heard a lot of well-meaning pastors say, well, I don't think Satan even knows what's happening. He doesn't have a clue what's coming up.
I don't agree with that. I really am beginning to think that he's just, I don't know, cocky, brazen enough to think that he can win.
I do. And, well, yeah, he may know what the back of the book is, but he's had this whole time to plot and to connive and twist and deceive and come up with another plan. And when we got into a little bit of that whole thing with CERN or with the Satan being bound by the sun, the time, and maybe portal jumping, time jumping. He's doing everything he can to try to win.
Well, and it's interesting, and in kind of researching and studying for today, one of the things that I came across that goes along with that is that this is not new. The Nazis were using Ouija boards and using summoning and those kinds of things during that time to like increase their power and to gain technology. Like they've been, and this is happening,
summoning the demons,
right? To ask
us.
them for more information and gain more information, but specifically knowledge about technology. And I mean, they did so much medical research and stuff and all of that. They're literally asking for help from the dark side. I mean, this is not new, and it is happening even today.
I'll probably get in big time trouble for saying this, but I have always said that America is no different, because when we defeated Hitler, what did we do? We took all of those scientists and brought them here, and I would say that we put them down in Area 51 and then concocted a thing so that way you stay away. But we never stopped with that technology.
We just
never
continued.
Stopped. Well, and then what did we do? We called it the Space Alliance, or the, what's it called?
The Space Force.
Yeah, Space Force, but it was the Intergalactic
Oh.
Treaty, and but you talk to anybody that was part of that.
Yeah,
We're
they were talking to other
the
people or other things.
Yes, but they will tell you, every single one of them, that it was demonic.
Right.
It was not extraterrestrial. It was extra, all right, but it was extra dimensional,
right?
Extra spiritual. It was demons, and that's who they're making the deal with.
Right.
And that is why those angels are locked up in Tartarus in the first place.
For giving us too much information, and information we were never meant to have.
And it wasn't good information.
No. And it wasn't information that we were meant to handle.
And so how are we getting this now if they're locked up? Well, obviously there has to be a way for messages to come back and forth through their minions. Which then poses a whole different thought about that, with Satan being able to roam back and forth.
Could he be the mastermind behind all of it all along?
Yeah.
Part of me wonders
so.
if he's not the one who whispered in Azazel's ear and said, hey, what might happen?
I believe it probably was.
Yeah. And then he went, well, I didn't.
So in a nutshell, what we see with Revelation chapter 13 is that the Antichrist is given power for 42 months, and authority was given to him over everyone. So who is giving the beast the authority? Ultimately, God is the one allowing it.
Not causing it.
And there is a difference.
There is. And mankind will give authority to the beast, to the human side of things.
They're going to gladly give it back to him. So he's going to find a back door. He's going to think that he can find a back door around the cross. And he will, because it's going to take a direct intervention this time by Jesus.
Well, and it's interesting, the fact that the false prophet raises him from the dead and that he's done all of these things. Jesus is our Savior. It'll be interesting to see. I can't help but think that he won't present himself as a Savior in some way.
Oh, yeah.
And with all that is happening, you just wonder what is it?
Well, look at all of the magazine titles or the articles of the rulers that we've had throughout the world, where they've called them the Messiah. We've actually had a president that was called the GOAT, the God of all things, the Messiah himself. We've seen the Time magazine of the gentleman from France who, could this be our Savior? And they have a picture of him walking on water. We have stuff from the gentleman from Saudi Arabia. And all over, people are trying to find that person, and could he be? Is he? But is that new?
No.
When Jesus when he let everyone know he was a Messiah, what was the problem?
Well, they wanted him to come in and rule. I mean, that's what they thought he was going to do.
Right, but he wasn't the first to claim that title.
No, not at all.
There have been so many people before.
They were like, yeah, we don't believe you this time. How are you different?
And then when Jesus is telling his disciples in the end times, he said, There will be those who say, there is the Messiah. Don't go out to the hills. There is the Messiah. Don't go to the valleys. There is the Messiah. Don't go. He said, you will not see the Messiah again until he comes back riding on the cloud of glory.
That's right.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot to think about. It's a lot to process. A little scary.
Mm-hmm.
Glad we won't be here.
And I know there's so much more. And the problem is, and maybe we'll be able to get into it a lot more in chapter 17, because we don't talk so much about the false prophet, I don't think, at that time. It's more just about that Antichrist and his global system. We could really get in depth. But here's the thing. If you want to know the nuts and bolts of everything, oh my gosh.
There's a ton of people that have done that.
A ton of information. You know, you can watch anything from Skywatch. You can watch anything from Jan Markell and Olive Tree Ministries. You can watch anything from Prophecy Watchers. Hear the Watchmen. Hear, oh gosh, there are so many people. Gary Hamrick, and then I watched several other ones last night, and just you name it. And they will get into the nuts and bolts. We know that for the average person, you're like going, I don't know if I'm even buying the whole Revelation thing anyway.
Right.
And you need it a little more simplified.
Not that it is simple, but a little bit more simplified.
And we're trying to hit that middle road of giving you some information that maybe you haven't heard.
Right.
Some cool stuff. But at the same time, trying to keep it understandable and not getting bogged down so much that you lose sight of the overall picture.
And that you stop reading Revelation or just get tuned off from it again. Because you came in going, oh my gosh, I'll never understand Revelation. And then we convinced you that was the case. Our hope was to convince you that that's not the case.
And not to have you so scared and paranoid that you're paralyzed in life and worrying about everything. Jesus gave this revelation to John so we can be prepared. He said, you may not know the day or the hour, but you're going to know the season. He says, how many times does he say, those who have ears, let them hear. Those who have eyes, let them see. Ask, seek, knock, and it will be granted to you. It's the wisdom. And is it going to matter what the mark is? No, because hopefully we're not going to be here, and we're so in hopes that you will not either, that you have already accepted Christ as your Lord and Savior. And that is what this is all about. It's the difference between truth and lies, light and darkness. And Christ and God is the truth. He is the light. He is the light that shines in darkness.
And he is the hope in the midst of all of this doom and gloom and scary, and hell will be unleashed on earth.
I would just want you to think about this. Again, there is nothing new under heaven. Everything that happens in Revelation was talked about in the Old Testament. It parallels. What is going to be asked of the people who are left behind is no different than what was asked of people of faith throughout all of time. The difference is, back then, they didn't have the option to be raptured up beforehand.
Right.
But there have been men and women who have had that line drawn in the sand. There were men and women who were told, you have to worship the idol or else. And they took the or else, but God was faithful. There have been Christians who were sent to the gladiators and to the lion's dens because it was worship the idol or else.
Deny your God or else.
Believe the lie
or else.
Change the culture
or else.
This is not new. And that's why God gives us this to see ahead of time. And he parallels everything that Christ did. The difference is Christ really resurrected. And Christ is alive, and Christ will still be alive. And we know what's going to happen to the Antichrist, to the false prophet, and to the image of the beast. And Satan, they all get thrown into the lake of fire for all of eternity.
And that's not where any of us want to spend our eternity.
God has given me some prophecies, and there was a couple really powerful ones that came back to back. And it had to do with this end time. I think I'm going to say that until chapter 17 and 18 as we get there. But it was very powerful. It had to do with the false prophet. And how I think that's really, I mean, what he showed me is very believable, how that's going to go down.
Right.
How do you get the whole world to worship
One
the Antichrist
person.
at one time? But I'm going to say that for 17 because it goes along with
The one world religion.
and the Great Reset. You will own nothing and you will be happy.
I bet Klaus Schwab is really sad that he said that. Got recorded.
Well, we hope we didn't scare you off too much. We know there's a lot of people out there right now that it is a lot of doom and gloom and a lot of scary stuff. And the hope is that Jesus has let us know this so that way we can spend eternity with him.
That's right.
And it doesn't have to be this way. So the best thing you can do, you know, we've been told you can't take anything to heaven. And I argue there is one thing that you can take.
Another soul.
So even if it's scary and hard to hear, knowing that there is going to be a line drawn in the sand, once you know, you can't unknow. And so we hearken and beckon you to go and share that good news with everyone that they need to accept Jesus now before they have to even get close to that line.
And that way you can say, no matter what you do with the information, you can't say, we didn't tell you.
So until next time,
Shalom.